Turn it over to you, Todd.
Perfect. Thanks, Mike. Welcome, everyone. I am Todd Berger from the Cambridge side of the business, from Cambridge Sound Management. I met many of you at the global sales meeting, so I'm still putting names with faces. So I apologize if I get confused from time to time going forward. But I'm learning, drinking from the fire hose and learning. So welcome. We're going to talk a little bit about the conference room edition, which is now a part of the BiAmp offering, and I thought I'd start out with a little history on this product. This product was really designed for the AV integration market, is kind of an add-on as a targeted approach to sound masking. And traditionally when we talk about sound masking, we talk about doing entire areas or many times entire floors or entire buildings where we put sound masking throughout. The concept behind this product was really to have an offering that was AV integrator friendly, where we could put sound masking just around a specific area where we had a need for private conversations, and primarily that means conference rooms in the commercial office space. So really what the conference room edition is, it's a direct field sound masking solution really designed to protect speech privacy. Many times when we talk about sound masking, what we're doing is we're reducing the level of distraction in open offices so people are more productive. But in this case, it's really to protect the speech privacy or private conversations that are taking place within four walls, so to speak. This graphic here hopefully gives you an idea that, that even though the conversation is taking place inside the conference room, the sound masking protection is really around the perimeter. Down this hallway is where we're covering up and we're lowering the intelligibility of human speech. So those conversations taking place inside the room can't be heard. A key selling point that you'll want to make when you talk about this product is it makes conversations less intelligible outside the space, not necessarily unheard. Many times you'll run into situations with end users where they think if you put sound masking outside of a room, you won't hear the people talking inside the room at all. You'll still hear them probably talking depending on what the wall material is made of, but the key part is it's less intelligible, so it's less easy to overhear the conversation or make out what's being said inside of the space. As I said earlier, it's also a targeted application of sound masking, very specific to a certain area around the perimeter of a space. And this is a package. So this is a very end-user, installer-friendly hardware package that includes all the components. And we'll talk a little bit about what's included with the package as we go along here. So facility types, obviously commercial buildings. This is a good play there, but also smaller spaces, insurance offices, retail banks may have an area where they're dealing with confidential information. Law firms, financial planners, real estate brokers, accounting firms. All of these are good applications for this product. The primary applications, obviously, is around the perimeter of a conference room or huddle space. In certain cases, you may do adjoining private offices if there's a shared demarcation wall between a conference room and a private office. You may put sound masking or coverage in the private office. We've used this product in some C-level corridors where we have, most of our C-level executives are all on the same floor, and we'll put this in the corridor outside their offices. Adjoining public spaces, waiting rooms, lobbies, those type of things, and of course surrounding human resources where there's confidential information being heard. A key point to make here, when you get into multiple zone systems, you're traditionally better off going with a full-blown sound masking system, such as our QT Pro and our Dynasound Pro type system. This is really a targeted area treatment around specific rooms. And I'll differentiate the two as we go along here just a little bit for you. So speech privacy should be a high consideration in any type of spaces where private conversations take place. And there are certain industries, I mentioned a few: healthcare, finance, higher education. They have unique exposure liability to if private information were to be overheard or to get out. So those are some kind of key things to think about as you're talking with clients. I always ask the question: do you have areas where you have private conversations where specific conversations need to take place that shouldn't be overheard? That's a great lead-in question when you're talking with clients. And what you'll find in most of these cases, just about every business has some need for confidentiality. Sometimes it's regulatory regulation. Other times they just have a need because it's a concern. Many meeting participants are typically more comfortable knowing that their conversations are protected. So they're more apt to participate in meetings. They're actually, they speak more freely when they know that their conversations are not being overheard. So they're a better participant, if you will. And I touched on this fact that in many cases businesses may benefit when you take steps to protect a client's confidential information. One of the good examples there is in finance, for instance. You want to protect people's account number information, social security numbers, all of those things that are verbally exchanged when opening an account or applying for a mortgage. So you want to mitigate that risk. So this is a good product to do all of those things. The key features that you'll find with this product is its pre-configured sound masking spectrum. So this is a plug-and-play system. Pre-programmed into the control module, the control processor, is the right speech privacy spectrum tailored to these specific little loudspeakers, or emitters as we call them. So there's very little adjustment that's needed by the integrator that puts this in. Really the only thing that they really need to do is adjust the level. That's different from traditional sound masking, where you have to go in and you have to account for the architectural acoustics and you do tunings and all of these other things. The other thing that's very unique about this product is it has an adjustable ramping of sound masking levels. So there's three basic modes of operation: an off, low, and normal. And when we change the sound masking level from off to normal privacy, for instance, what happens is the sound masking level increases over a duration of time. It ramps up, and that ramping is adjustable, which we'll talk about. The other thing unique to this product are the privacy signs. And the privacy signs are there really to let meeting occupants know when their privacy is protected. So if you can imagine, in a conference room, I would be sitting inside the room, and the sound masking loudspeakers or emitters would be outside of the room. Well, I'd have no way of knowing when that system was active if I didn't have some visual indication, and that's really the basis of the privacy signs. You put a privacy sign inside the conference room, and then when the system is active and it's reached its ramping goal, that sign gets lit, and that way I know when I'm in the meeting I can talk freely, and I don't have to worry about anyone overhearing my conversation. So there's two programmable sound masking levels to adjust. These are programmed traditionally by the integrator. We call it normal and low. And low is a lower sound masking level, so there's some basic sound masking taking place. And so when we increase the system and we activate it, the delta between low and normal is less than it would be if it was completely off. So it adds a little ambient at low, and then we ramp it up to normal, for example. I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through this. All of these systems use our direct field QT adjustable emitters. They get their name as an adjustable emitter because of the little switches on the back, and that gives us the ability to attenuate each individual loudspeaker if we need to. Most cases with these systems we don't. They're all set predetermined at the factory at 0 dB, but they can be turned down to -3, -6, -9. So what's included with the kit are 8 emitters and 7 cables to interconnect the emitters between each other. These things just daisy chain together. We also include a home run cable that goes from the control processor where the signal's generated to the first emitter on the cable run. So that's already included as well. All the emitters ship with that little ring that you see there to go into acoustic ceiling tile, our ACT rings. That's already included in the box. We also have some other options for other types of ceilings and other types of mountings. I mentioned the dip switches. We can turn each individual loudspeaker down, -3, -6, -9. I have a fairly decent example of where that could be useful here in a couple slides. We want to evenly space these in the ceiling in the adjoining space, such as a hallway. So we're going to very carefully place these down a corridor, for instance, in the middle of the corridor at a predetermined spacing, and that's really what's going to give us the consistency as we walk through the space. It'll be exactly the same level. The system comes with 8 emitters, but you can easily add more if you need. So available as a part number, I don't have it right in front of me, but there are additional boxes of emitters that you can purchase to go with this. So if you need 12 or 16 emitters, you can purchase additional boxes to go with the kit. The kit's capable of operating up to 120 devices total. So you can do some really large areas with this if needed. Out of the box, assuming that you have 8 emitters, that's approximately 40 linear feet of protection, or 40 feet of wall space, if you will, around the perimeter of the room. And that's about 800 square feet. So if we have large open spaces, for instance, we always do 2 rows of emitters. I'll give you an example of that here shortly. If it's a corridor, we typically do 1 row of emitters right down the center of the corridor. But that's out of the box about 800 square feet is what you can protect. I mentioned earlier there are emitter mounting options sold separately. These include drywall brackets if we have hard lid ceilings, beam brackets for open structure. We have a nice pendant mount now that's available where the emitter hangs down. It can hang down at the level of the pendant lighting or below the HVAC ducts if needed. And then we have some universal brackets which give you some flexibility in mounting too. Maybe on a wall, for instance. You can use some of those things. So these are all accessories that work with the emitters to facilitate some of the mounting. The bundle itself has a control module, 2 privacy signs, the 8 emitters. It includes a 4-gang adapter plate for the control module so that it can go into a 4-gang box, both US and Europe. It has 2 1-gang adapter plates for the privacy signs. So if it's new construction, a lot of cases, they may want to run a box and conduit for the cabling to it. It can adapt to a single-gang US or European box. We also have some adhesive sign back plates for the signs. So let's say that you wanted to mount the sign on glass. There are adhesive pads that attach the sign onto a glass surface, and then there's a backing plate that would go on the other side of the glass that covers up the back side of the unit, so you don't see the connections on the back. 2 50-foot plenum rated cables for the privacy signs. Those are 22 gauge 2 conductor cables. That is typically cut to length. So if you only need 30 feet for one and 15 to the next, you can just cut that to length and field terminate it. Comes with a power supply. I mentioned the 7 interconnect cables, if you will, between emitters, and a 50-foot home run cable, as well as a hole saw for the ACT tile. So options, you can add on emitters, and you can add on cables and mounting accessories with the system if needed. So all of that stuff is options. So you can build this out into a pretty large system. The whole thought process here was to take and give you a targeted sound masking approach in a box, right? Everything that you'd need to install it would be there. You simply take it out of the box, install it, and it works. From a cabling perspective, we've got our control processor that typically goes inside the conference room. In some cases, it may go on an AV rack if they don't want it visible on the wall, but a lot of cases it'll go somewhere inside the conference room. We have the emitter cabling that goes out to the emitters, and it just daisy chains from out on the previous emitter to input on the next, out to in, out to in. There's actually 2 cable runs on the back of the controller, so you can go 2 different directions with the cabling if you choose to. Each cable run supports up to 60 emitters or 1,000 foot of category cable, whichever comes first. So you can go, literally 1,000 foot to the east and 1,000 foot to the west, up to 60 emitters on each cable run. Lots of flexibility. Privacy signs. Traditionally, one privacy sign, as I said, would be visible from inside the conference room. That's so meeting participants know that they can participate in the space, and they know that their conversation is covered up. Second privacy sign is really optional. In some cases, people like to put them outside of the conference area, kind of such as a out of on air or meeting spaces occupied type indication. But in other cases, the second privacy sign may go on a separate wall inside the conference room. In other cases, the second privacy sign may not even be used. But we include 2 with the kit because that's what the control processor can support. It can support up to 2 privacy signs total. We can also trigger this externally. So if in cases where my control processor is in an AV rack, for instance, and I don't want it visible in the space, I can control it from an occupancy sensor, a door switch, contact closure, Tessera GPIO. And Andrew just did a recent Cornerstone article on how to do exactly that. Control this from Tessera, for instance. So a lot of different ways it can be controlled. Traditionally, the front panel that you see there, the 4 buttons on the front panel, those will typically enable the system, but I can also lock them out too if I want to. So if I want to control it only from contact closure, I can lock out the front panel so no one can interfere with the operation on the front panel. So on the front panel, you have a normal level, and that's going to be your most private setting. A low level, that's just to add some background ambience, and then off, okay? And all of those levels, the normal and low, you can configure that based on the architecture and based on the amount of privacy needed inside of the setup menu. So you can set what level becomes normal. You can set what level becomes low. That's field configurable. You can also configure the ramping times. So as I go from low to normal, I think we give you anywhere from 0 to 120 seconds to make that ramp, both up and down. And that's kind of important too, because with sound masking, traditionally it's on all the time. It's a very constant signal, so people don't notice it. This is a little different take. These are systems that we're turning on and turning back off. So by ramping the system up and down, we alleviate shocking people that could be in that adjoining space with something that happens instantaneously. So it's less disturbing. Some installation methods here. I mentioned that we've got on the right there a 4-gang box adapter, so the control module can fit onto a 4-gang box. Also included is the surface-mounted wall backplate, where you can literally screw the backplate to the wall and mount the controller right onto it. And we also include a back box that can be cut into an existing drywall wall or wood possibly. So this is kind of like the old workbox, if those of you who may be familiar, where you can retrofit into an existing space, cut the box into the wall, and then adapt the control module to that box. So lots of flexibility there as far as mounting. On the back side of the unit, you have 2 different cable runs for the emitters, as I mentioned. There's 2 cable run ports. We call them run 1 and run 2. You don't have to use 2 of them if you choose not to. If you only had 8 emitters, let's say, and they were all down a hallway, you could make that 1 cable run. but we do provide a second port there for flexibility in case you need to go off in a different direction with some additional emitters. There's also the privacy sign connection. Like I said, that's a 22 gauge 2-conductor cable. Each privacy sign does home run back to the control module. You can't daisy chain those, for example. Each sign is wired independently. And then there's a contact closure on the back as well. That's a normally open contact closure. When that contact goes closed, then a function will happen, going from off to normal, for example. Power supply, there's 2 power ports there. I don't know, hopefully you guys can see my mouse here. Right here is a second port, so if you need to remote this power supply, which is a little wall wart type power supply, you can extend cable out from this terminal strip and remote your power supply. This is a coaxial barrel connector as well. So there's 2 connectors on the back for power. All right, some controls. On the front, 3 modes of operation: off, low, and normal. The normal button and the on button do exactly the same thing. That's a preset level that you'll set inside the setup menu. When the system's off or going to off, the privacy signs will flash when it's ramping down, going down to off. When it reaches the off position, it will turn the privacy sign completely off and leave it that way. Same thing happens with the low setting. The privacy sign will flash when it's ramping down to the low setting, and then when it reaches that low setting, whatever that may be, you can set that in the setup menu, whatever that level may be. When it reaches that particular level, then the sign will go off once again. Normal or on, the privacy sign will flash when it's ramping upward in level till it reaches the normal setting that you program. And then once it hits that level, that normal level, the privacy sign becomes lit solid when it's reached. The front panel up and down ramping times are set independently, and they're programmable from 0 to 120 seconds. So I can have the thing ramp down in 5 seconds, and I can have it ramp back up across a 30-second time frame, for example. You can set that inside the setup menu completely autonomously. To get into the setup menu on this, you will hold the left and right arrow buttons, the off-on buttons, for 5 seconds, and you'll enter setup mode. Navigation is the right and left buttons, and then when you want to select, make a setting change or select a setting, you use the up and down arrows to select. Pretty straightforward, as most of these components are. Inside the setup menu, the functions you have is to set the sound level low, anywhere from level 0 to level 30. Level 30, by the way, is about 60 decibels A-weighted, so that's about the max level you can run. You can also set the masking level, same thing, 0 to 30. The ramp up time and ramp down time, 0 to 120 seconds. I do have the ability to lock out the off button, and the reason for that is I may want to only give the end user the ability to toggle from low to normal, for instance. So I can lock it out so they never can turn the system off. They can only toggle it between low and normal. I can also lock out the entire front panel button structure if I choose. So if I wanted to run this from Tessera, let's say, and trip a GPIO contact on Tessera, I could lock out the entire front panel so no one could make a change by walking up to the controller if it was accessible. The contact closure toggles, you can set which mode of operation you want, either off to normal or low to normal, either one. And then you can set the contact closure ramp up and ramp down times independently of the front panel. So again, those are 0 to 120 seconds to ramp up, excuse me, or to ramp back down. And those are independent times from what the front panel buttons how they would react. So contact closure, I could have it ramp up across a 20-second window, and if I had it ramp up from the front panel, it may be 30 seconds, for instance. So some functionality there. Another good reason for that is a lot of times if this is integrated with a third-party control like Crestron or AMX, they may want a priority override. So the contact closure on the back side could be ramped down in 0 seconds, so it instantly mutes the sound masking. Where day-to-day operation may be, a 7-second ramp down from the front panel, some things like that. Lots of flexibility there. So that's pretty much the setup menu itself. Contact closure on the back, like I said, you can ramp it from off to normal or low to normal. It's designed for a dry contact closure, an external switch relay. I said that we could activate it from Tessera's GPIO contacts. That article does exist on Cornerstone now, by the way. It's up there and available. I mentioned that the contact closures can be different from the front panel to the contact closure ramp times. So privacy signs, each one is home run, and you can support either 1 or 2 signs. That's a question that you'll probably get quite a bit from integrators. They'll say, hey, can I do 4 signs on the system? No, the maximum is 2 signs on the system. So here's a pretty common example, conference room configuration, where we've got a conference room adjoining an open office, for example. And the spacing of the emitters is very critical to providing uniform sound masking coverage. So we want it to be very, very consistent, within 1 decibel, if we can get it. So in order to do that, basically, we have to adjust the spacing based on the ceiling height. So if you have an emitter mounting height of 8 to 9 foot, that's going to be an 8 by 8 grid. If it's 9 to 11 foot for an emitter mounting height, that's a 10-foot spacing. And anything above 11 foot, we go to a 12 by 12 spacing. Traditionally, you will never go beyond a 12 by 12 grid spacing, and there's some acoustic reasons for that. So anywhere from 8 to 12 foot. Spacing from the wall is always half the grid distance. So if I had an 8-foot ceiling in this example, my spacing would be an 8 by 8 grid, and I could be 4 foot away from any wall surface, up to 4 foot. You'll never want them closer than 2 foot because then you'll get a little bit of acoustic gain and it'll get louder along the wall. But anywhere from 2 to 4 foot, just take that grid spacing and cut it in half, and that's your maximum. As we said, the privacy signs, they indicate that the conference participants, to the conference participants, that their private conversations are protected. So that's really for the benefit of those people inside the conference room, because they can't hear that the sound masking is activated outside the room, so they need some type of a visual indication. And just as a reminder, with sound masking, we always put those sound masking signals where the unintentional listeners are located, not necessarily where the talkers are located. And again, when you talk to specifically to the AV integrator crowd, which I was one of for many years, we think that all the technology exists inside the conference room, right? So it's a little bit of a change of thinking that while the technology may be integrated inside the room, the actual emitters are located outside of the room, because that's where the unintentional listeners could be. Another example, and as I promised, here's an example where you would use those little attenuation dip switches on a couple of emitters. The weak link here, acoustically, is the doorway from the conference room leading into the hallway. So we're probably going to need a little bit more privacy in that hallway than we will in that open office, because the open office has a solid wall that is separating the conference room and the private office. So in that instance, we would have a higher level in the corridor outside the conference room and a lower level inside the private office. Excuse me. So what we would do is inside the private office, we would just turn down those 2 emitters, 3 decibels, and less sound masking there, but still adequate sound masking to provide privacy, because the wall is a good barrier of sound. Second privacy sign, again, could go outside the door. in the hallway if we chose to. We could put it inside the conference room, or we may not install it at all. It depends on what the customer really wants there. So, kind of a little bit of a review and a summary. We'll take some questions here shortly. This is a targeted approach, so we want to really use it to protect speech privacy in specific areas and on demand. So this is a system that goes on and back off, where with sound masking, generally, we always leave it on at a constant level. Very short duration with ramping capabilities. So we're going to use this when we're having a meeting, when the conference room is occupied, and typically we won't turn it on in cases where it's not needed. Privacy signs are included. Very simple installation. Everything's in the box, easy to use, and it's pretty friendly with room automation. Crestron, AMX, Extron, and like I said, you can use it with GPIO with Tessera now as well. So the sales summary. This is a targeted speech privacy solution with a strong value proposition. Very innovative approach to deliver value to your commercial clients. This is a real-world problem. If you talk to folks in commercial office spaces, they will say, yes, I can always walk by this conference room and hear exactly what's happening on the other side of the wall. So these problems do exist, and when you start to ask these questions, you'll find a lot of good homes for a product like this. It's also a good conversation starter to kind of introduce sound masking. What we found with this is when we install a small portion of a building that has sound masking, or we introduce sound masking to a small portion of the building, it has a tendency to grow. And I've got plenty of good examples where we've done 4,000 or 5,000 square foot of sound masking, and pretty soon that grows to the rest of the floor, and then it grows to the rest of the building, and then pretty soon it grows to other buildings throughout the enterprise. So pretty great conversation starter. Really profitable add-on sale for integrators. I kind of joke that the way to sell this product is, do you want privacy with that? We're already providing a solution for the conference room, for the huddle space. We're already doing that integration. And it's pretty simple to ask, are you going to have conversations inside this room that need to remain private, or that you have privacy concerns of being overheard? So it's a pretty simple add-on. And a lot of times, it's as simple as asking the end user, do you want me to include a privacy option for this room? We're going to do the displays and the TCM1s and a Forte in this room. Do you want me to include an option for privacy? A lot of folks don't really understand that this type of technology exists, so it's a good way to lead into a sale. It does leverage CSM's leadership in acoustics, masking, and speech privacy protection. As I said earlier, it's really speech privacy in a box. You can simply plug and play it and adjust the sound masking level. That's really all that needs to be done with the system. There's no complicated tuning or adjustment of the spectrum, or that's all built into the control processor's DSP already. Easy to retrofit. MSRP $29.40, and it's a 50 off dealer product. And they're currently available out there. I'll go back at the end here and give you the part number one more time. I didn't put the part number on there. So questions to ask your clients. Are there areas surrounding a conference room where you have privacy concerns? Are there specific areas in the facility where confidential information is discussed? Are there adjoining spaces next to your conference room where conversations are easily overheard? And you'll always hear a yes to that these days with architecture. Are you bound by regulatory mandates regarding privacy protection? Some examples here. GLBA is a privacy law in the finance sector, FERPA in education, and HIPAA in healthcare. And so some types of enterprise are bound by these privacy laws. Do you need speech privacy surrounding your conference room? It's another good leading question. So hopefully these are little things that you can take out there and use and kind of plant into the dealer's vernacular to turn into some profitable little sales for you. I'm going to wrap up. A lot of these resources are being moved over to the BiAmp website, from what I understand. I don't know where they're going to be, but I can tell you where they are on the Cambridge website right now, cambridgesound.com/conference room. And there you'll find sales sheets, a product-specific brochure, there's the picture there, fact documents, product videos, installation guide, product images, and as I mentioned, the Cornerstone article with Tessera GPIO, that's actually now available. That was published last week. So lots of great resources there for you. The last couple slides here, I will put some folks said, hey, who do I contact on the Cambridge team if we have some questions or if we have a need? We want to find it more information, so I thought this was great that we put up just a little map. In the West, the regional sales manager is Kim DiNardo, field sales engineer is Jeremy Krug. The North Central region is David Wood and Mark Ferderer. Mark also serves as the FSE in the South Central currently. His RSM there is Ray Allen. Northeast is Paul Tusa and Tom Zimmerman. Tom Zimmerman also helps Shannon Geronimo out in the New York metro area. And in the Southeast, the RSM is Ken Peck, and the field sales engineer is Mike Griffin. Don Kugler's on the call, I believe. He's the director of sales for the Americas. He covers the entire country. This team really reports to him. And I'm the manager of tech services at Cambridge. I'm always happy to help as well. So there's some numbers and some email addresses for you in case you have a need. I will tell you that I think that pretty much everyone on this list also has a sample system right now. So if you do have a need or an immediate need, we can get you a product shipped in for a demo or so a dealer can see it if needed. We also have an inside sales team. Mara Wilcox is the manager of our inside sales. These are folks that deal with the dealer base on the traditional Cambridge side on a daily basis. Laura Daly in the Northeast, Amy Wilson Mid-Atlantic, Rita Pilla in the Southeast, South Central is Melissa Griffin. Corrine is our order entry gal. She's in the inside office. And in the West, we have Todd Silva as well. And Corinne Davis up in the North Central. So these people are there pretty much normal business hours in the Waltham office. So if you have some questions, they're well-versed, they know the product well, and they're happy to help as well. So hopefully that'll give you some contacts there. All right. I believe that's it. We went through that pretty quick. I'm sure we've got some questions that I haven't seen. So we'll open it up to some questions. How's that? Specifically.
I reviewed a few. So one of the questions was about the power supply, and you covered that. So I think that's answered. And the next question, just in case people aren't following along or they're mobile, was, will the presentation be available? And I'm going to help out with that, and I'll post that, and then I'll give you the link for share file where it's going to be. And then the last question that's posted over here in the conversation is that, can we get a sample emitter? I mean, the short answer is yes. The long answer is that there's been some back and forth on demo gear, and right now there's not going to be demo gear produced as far as from the traditional BiAmp team. It's up for conversation. Talk to your director is probably the best place to start that conversation, and then go from there. And then Todd, if you don't mind, I just had a couple things that I'd like to add in that maybe came up the last time, or just some food for thought for the folks. We do have this SKU in CRM. Our model number is 91.0518.900, and then I believe the traditional Cambridge model number is QT-CRE. So if you see either one of those referenced, that's what's going on there. Eric,
Mike, do you know if that's getting added to the Tessera price sheet?
That's up for conversation. I think Ron wants us to relook at that. There's some pros and cons to adding it to the Tessera price sheet, as you can imagine, and I know that that's being discussed right now. Um,
I need
so,
something I can share with a customer. I can't give them the full Cambridge price book.
yep, I understand, and
Cool.
I can't answer that today. That's I know it's being reviewed by executive team, so stay tuned, please. You probably saw Eric's post. This is in CRM right now. It's just in Qt. It's just called. It's a tab, just like Vocia or Tessera or otherwise. When you're doing a quote, and it's broken out between QT Conference Room Edition, and then there's a separate subset for Australia, European Union, United Kingdom. It's 1470 straight across the board, as was discussed. And then there's another SKU that you can add a 4-pack of emitters, which is 22540. The thing that I would steer clear from right now is the on-site commissioning. That was put there as a placeholder, I believe, because right now that's a $10,000 fee that's associated with that services category, and that's not applicable for this particular product. This is really meant to be retrofit. This is something that the integrator out of the box, never doing it before, should plan on 5 hours of field time, and then of course their technicians are going to get better as they go. So don't use the services fee of the $10,000 right now. I think that's just a placeholder, and I'm sure that'll be adjusted in the future.
Yeah, I can tell you when we first developed the product, the manual that came with it was pretty complete. We actually gave it to a couple integrators and said, here's an install, and we kind of sat back and wanted to see what kind of issues they may have installing it. And I think one of the integrators who had done a lot of Cambridge in the past did it in about 3 hours. Another one took a little bit longer. So I think 5 hours for a first system is probably a pretty good start, a pretty good estimate. And after their second or third install, they'll do much better than that. But and that's assuming that it's a 9-foot ACT tile and the cabling is pretty easy to move around throughout the space. So there's always corner cases, but it does go in pretty quick. And like I said, everything that they need is really in the box, down to the hole saw for the tile. So it should be a pretty turnkey kit. Any other questions?
No, very cool stuff. Very impressive.
Thanks, Todd. Thanks, Mike.
Yep. Thank you, Todd.
Thanks, everyone. Feel free to reach out if you do have questions.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.